first of all, thank you so very much for coming. I really, it's great to see you guys here, particularly some new faces here. So we always like having you guys come in, and if you enjoyed this event, we have several other events over the course. Every month we do usually these Masters of Game Design, which are our speaker series, but we also do what we call a make and mingle, where we have you guys come in, we provide the pizza, we provide the Wi-Fi, and you guys hang out and work on your games and meet lots of cool people. It's a great way to network and to make new friends. And then the other event that we're going to be doing in December is we're going to be doing a paper prototyping workshop. So we'll have we'll lead you through the creation of a paper prototype, which also, for those of you interested in tabletop, is essentially a board game. And so we will take you from not knowing how to do anything to, by the time you finish up with us, you'll have a playable game that is all your own. So hopefully you can join us for that. Just keep your eyes peeled to Meetup and any of the other social groups, and that's where we like to let you guys know about the events that we're having. By the way, I am Scott Rogers. I am your host, and I have a little prepared. I always have a little prepared statement or introduction about our event tonight. So tonight's guest has been working in gaming for almost 30 years. Did you know that? 29 years this year, right?
I know.
Almost.
I know.
He has been a programmer, a producer, a composer, a audio designer on over 60 games. But he's most well known for being the tyrannical overlord of his own company, Way Forward, which is located in Santa Clarita, California, so not too far from here. And it's also one of the video game industry's oldest independent development studios, so that's pretty awesome. Some of the titles he's helped create include A Boy and His Blob, Mighty Switch Force, Transformers, Rise of the Dark Spark, Silent Hill, Book of Memories, and Ducktales Remastered, and the Shantae series. So please welcome our guest, a master of game development, Voldi Way. All right, Voldi, so we always start here with a super hard question. I hope you're ready.
Uh-oh.
That question is, Voldi Way, what is your favorite game?
My favorite game? Oh, wow. Gosh, I think that changes on a weekly basis.
Me too.
Actually, just last week, I had to uninstall Boggle with Friends, which sounds silly, but my brother had come to visit from Washington, D.C., and he said, oh, you got to play this. So we started playing, and then, you know, the phones now track how much time you spend, and I was spending like 3.5 hours a day playing Boggle with Friends. I'm like, oh.
But I'll bet your word power is very strong.
It has improved.
That's good. That's good.
At least in the last few weeks.
As long as we learn. All right, Boggle with Friends. That's on the permanent record.
As of last week.
Okay, as of last week. All right. So I have to get this out of the way first. Your first claim to fame was as a ghost child in the movie The Changeling. What do you remember from that experience?
Man, you really dig up some
Oh,
stuff from
just
my
wait
sordid past.
till I dig
and
up.
You even had the composer. Most people don't know that I ever wrote music for a game, because that was like back in the
That was on
90s.
the Mickey game, right? Yeah.
Wow, where do you even find this stuff?
I do my research.
So yeah, The Changeling, it was interesting. It's a horror film. I don't know if has anyone here seen The
1980s,
Changeling?
I've seen
And
it.
it's not the oh, you've seen it, okay. It's not the
Remake,
the new one, the remake one.
Well, because you wouldn't be a child.
Right. But that was a completely different story, actually. The Changeling, I think probably most people forgot about, but then a couple years ago, Stephen King put it on his top 10 favorite horror films list. So that was.
So really, he was saying my top 10 favorite actors are Voldi Way.
Of course, yeah.
Right, of course. Because
the success of that film was all because of me.
Of course, yeah.
It was filmed in Canada because it was all underwater. Like all of my all of my scenes were underwater, and I think child labor laws wouldn't let people stay submerged or something. I don't know if it was because I was like naked or underwater or both, but they had to film it in Canada. So that was my first time being in Canada.
Wow, naked and underwater.
Yeah, naked and underwater.
All right, a good way to start. Other than being naked and underwater, do you remember like what it was? Did you ever work with George C. Scott, who was the star of the film, or?
I don't even think he was there, but I was 9 and I had no idea who he was.
Right,
so he might have been there and I just didn't recognize him.
He was just some old guy,
Yeah,
right?
just
So
some old guy.
who cares, right?
Yeah.
All right. So my last question about the Changeling is, Do you ever go to any of the horror conventions as a guest? Why
yet.
not? Why not?
Hey,
there's
let
at
'em
least
know.
there's
I'm
at
out
least
there.
2 of them in there's Monsterpalooza and Son of Monsterpalooza, right? You could make a little extra scratch being signing autographs.
Yeah, if anyone remembers that.
They will, trust me, they will.
Well, actually, an episode of the Nickelodeon show "Are You Afraid of the Dark"? I guess I think it came out recently because one of our testers sent it to me. But they were actually talking about like who is more hardcore horror fan.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, but I'll bet you haven't seen The Changeling. And I was like, oh yes, I've seen The Changeling. I'm like, wow.
There
so
you go. You're a
counts as
hardcore. Yeah. Right. Awesome. Well, thank you. That was more for me than these guys. But all right. So, what was the first video game you remember playing?
Wonder Boy 3. Well, actually, the very first was probably Pong way back in the day.
Yeah.
And then there were text-based adventure. I remember going to my mom's work. She worked at a bank, but they had a mainframe there, and so she had. It wasn't Zork. It was like Adventure. You know, the one where you just type like.
Right. Yeah. Colossal Cave Adventure.
Yeah. And so that was probably the first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So, all right. So, according to your bio online, you were something of a child prodigy because you went to college at 11 years old.
Well, it's a little misleading. It's just because I had never gone to school. Like my parents were very much hippies. That's why I have the name Voldi.
Okay.
You know, and so they kept me out of school, and
But intentionally.
Intentionally, yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, you could say I was homeschooled, but that would be an overstatement because they didn't believe in curriculum or classes. They just figured if I had questions, I would ask. And
Your school was life, man.
Yeah. So generally, if I had a question like, "Hey, how do I read?" they would teach me. But then when it came to like math, my dad had like gotten straight Fs in school and hated math, and so I was 12. Actually, a lot happened when I was 12. It wasn't 11; it was 12.
Okay. All right.
Although I'm curious where you even found this stuff. I was 12, and that's when I really got interested in video games because a friend of mine got a Commodore 64. They had just come out. And man, we became obsessed. And I would spend every waking moment at his house. And back then, you know, you turn on the computer and it boots into BASIC. So basically you had to be a programmer. Yeah. So anyway, I quickly realized that in order to program or make games, you needed to know math.
Right.
And since I had no schooling, I could barely add and subtract, much less multiply and divide, and I was 12. So I read this book called The Realm of Numbers by Isaac Asimov, and just became, like, it blew my mind. It was like a whole new world. So I then read the sequel, The Realm of Algebra, and was hooked. So I asked my dad, and he's like, algebra? I don't know how to help you with that. So he signed me up at Orange Coast College. And I guess there's no age limit. You can sign up for college at any age. So, so I took a math class. He signed me up for pre-calculus, and I went in and I took the pre-test, you know, where they kind of figure out where you fit in the program. And I'm pretty sure I got the lowest score ever on their pre-test. I have nothing to back that up, but I had no idea. Everything was totally foreign. And in fact, even taking the test, I had never taken a test before. And it was on one of those little Scantron forms. Yeah. And so I'm looking around at the other students, not trying to copy their answers, but just trying to figure out like what I do with this weird form thing. But anyway, afterwards, the teacher pulled me aside and said, you know, I don't think this is the right class for you. So he sent me down to Algebra 2 Trig, which, you know, I got zeros, like literally zeros on the first 2 tests because they were written, not multiple choice, so I couldn't even guess. But fortunately, the instructor, Sally Thomas, who remains one of my heroes, she spent pretty much every waking moment, like at least all her office hours with me. And so, you know, by the end of the semester, I had gotten an A in that. And by the end of that year, I had gone through second semester of calculus.
Awesome.
So.
Yay for teachers.
Yeah, no, it was great.
That's great. Actually, what you should have told people was that your first educator was Isaac Asimov.
True, technically, yeah.
All right. So you went to college, and then you went to regular school, right? A little bit. Is that incorrect on your bio? Did you actually go to like a high school and?
I went to one semester of 10th grade just because I wanted to see what it was all about.
Okay.
But that was when I was 14, so I'd been at Orange Coast College for a couple years.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't even make it through the full school year of 10th grade.
Just because they're 10th graders, and who wants to deal with that, right? All right. So instead of going to high school, you decided to start a company with your friend David, and you were doing software, but you weren't doing game software.
Well, yeah, but not David, but yes.
Oh, see, once again, my
Scott.
information is... Oh, Scott.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Scott.
who's David?
I don't know who David is.
I don't know. All right, well, there's obviously some
Scott.
holes in the online.
Somebody can't trust anything you read on the internet.
You know. All right, Scott. So who's Scott?
So
Not me. It's another Scott.
Right, different Scott.
Yes.
Scott Maynard. So I was mostly hanging out. I was taking class at Orange Coast College mostly so I could get access to the computer lab there. And so I was spending like from the minute they opened till the minute they closed, pretty much I was there just all the time. So I was kind of like a staple of the lab. And this guy, Scott, came in looking for a programmer to help him with a sheet metal fabrication project. And so everyone pointed at me, and I had nothing better to do because by then I was like 14, and I'm,
What are you going to do at 14?
Right. So I offered to help him out because sheet metal fabrication was really archaic, like that you printed, you typed stuff on paper tape, and it punched holes, and then it controlled the machines, and there was a lot of wasted metal involved, and anyway, he just wanted something where he could type in the design and then proof it on the screen before wasting metal.
Right.
So I thought, wow, it sounds like an interesting challenge, and I did it. He didn't have any money to pay me, but he said, hey, if you want, we'll try to sell this to other people, and you can have a third of or it was at half the business at that time. So he started selling it to his friends, and we sold like $650,000 worth that first year.
Wow.
And this was back in the mid 80s, so it was worth even more then. And then that's when we got a marketing guy, Carl. So he became our third partner. So there were three of us, and then over the next 5 years, we got up to like $5 million a year in sales.
Wow.
So yeah.
What was the name of that company?
MetalSoft. It actually, if you look it up, it was bought by U.S. Amada. Actually, if I sold my ownership to my two partners for $400,000 when I turned 20. Like on my 20th birthday, I thought, what am I doing with my life? I should be making games, and so I sold my ownership to my two partners and started Way Forward. Mm-hmm. But I sold it for $400,000, which after taxes was like $250,000. Right. But if I had waited a little bit longer, they ended up selling for $20 million to U.S. Amada. It was like 10 years later, so I would have had to given up on 10 years of profit, game development.
Right. Yeah. Right. So, all right. So you sold out, but happily, right? And you have this seed money. It's like, what gave you the impetus to go, hey, I should be making games? Like you said, you had this revelation that I should be making games, but like, what got you to think that way, like that I'm going to do it myself, and B, like who even knew that games were, like I didn't know that games were a thing people made when I was 14 years old, right? Like where did you get this knowledge?
Well, back then the lines were blurry. Like I said, if you were playing games, you were probably programming because the operating system was a programming language, so everyone knew how to program, or everyone with a computer knew how to program. So I had been programming just as a hobby since I was 12 and really wanted to have a go at it full time. And I figured, well, I'll give it a try. If it fails, I'll go out and get a real job. Right. But so far it's been 30 years and I haven't had to get a real job.
So what were some of those games you were making when you were like 12 years old? And
stupid stuff, like just messing around, in BASIC and stuff. And then at Orange Coast College, I had Apple II computers, which was where I learned assembly language because you could do call -151 and it would jump to it's actually machine language. Right. So you could just type in like hex codes and make stuff happen. So yeah, that's pretty much where I got my start. Okay. But they were pretty boring back then.
So yeah, well, you had the knowledge. You knew how to program. What then made you realize, hey, I should start a company making games? Because that's a pretty big leap to make, right? From like a lot, I'm sure a lot of us, and particularly some of us that are older, were programming games and making them for fun, but like I never thought to sell them, right? Like I would just make them, and all right, what do I do with them? I don't know. I just play them, and that's it, right? Like who did somebody give you the advice to hey, you should start a company, or did you see something somewhere, like read a magazine or hear an interview or something, or like how did this revelation come to you?
Well, keep in mind I had been a part owner of of another company, and so I thought, oh, running a business is really easy, and a lot of people actually did the opposite. They tried to talk me out of it, including my parents.
Right.
Like, but remember, they were hippies, so we settled that we went to a psychic, and the psychic said, no, it's okay, he can start his company.
There you go.
So they backed off a bit.
So the psychic is to thank.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, awesome.
So I started, and I thought, oh, this is going to be so easy. And I really wanted to do online multiplayer games. I had been playing with BBSs, like bulletin board systems, just text-based things for years. And I thought, I want to do a graphical BBS, like a graphical. But back then, in 1990, there really wasn't anything. And so I bought banks of modems, and I just did all kinds of stupid stuff and quickly squandered, all my cash.
Right.
So after probably a year and a half or maybe 2 years, I'd run out of money. And I thought, I got to start doing something. So I made some games for Windows, and back then a programmer like me could do all the art and animation too, because they were like Pac-Man type games. And then I realized that it's really hard to sell the stuff, and there's no real market for it. So I was selling at swap meets for like $20. Like I bought a little shrink wrap machine, and it was really a struggle.
All right.
And then I took out some like magazine ads and some like those mailers and those little card packs that you get in the mail and then you throw in the trash. Well, I had a card in there, and I could barely. I ended up selling like 3,000 units, but it wasn't enough to survive on. But then a distributor saw my card and said, one of the little ads, and said, "Hey, you want to let us sell it?" And I said, "No, I can do better on my own." And then I really ran out of money. I'm like, "Okay, fine." A few months later, I'm like, "Okay, you still want to sell this?" And they turned around and sold like 500,000 units of it. So.
And what was that game that you sold 500,000?
That was a fun pack for Windows. It was just.
So I wanted to ask you about the fun pack, because the fun pack sounds very mysterious. Like what was in the pack and what made it so fun?
Well, back then Windows didn't actually support sound. It was for Windows 2.1. It didn't support sound or anything. It was really, and there were no games for Windows. I mean, there I think Solitaire might have come with it. Minesweeper maybe, but there really wasn't much, and definitely nothing like arcade like.
Right.
So so I got together with some friends, and we made like a collection of games, and honestly they were kind of like semi-blatant rip-offs of like other arcade games.
Homages.
But whatever.
Homages,
yes,
yeah.
tributes
Yes.
to classic arcade games.
Like what? What were some of the games that inspired you?
Kind of like Pac-Man, or sort of like Missile Command, things like that.
All right. So classic Atari games and things like that.
Yeah, and so that was the first.
Right.
thing.
So Fun Pack was your launch into the video gaming industry. And you said,
that was the one that actually sold.
Okay.
My first one was called Cybernet, and it never turned into anything. So.
Right. Well, you could always bring it back, right?
Yeah.
Right. Cool. So, all right. So what? I mean, like, what advice? All right. So obviously times have changed. It's almost 30 years now. What advice do you have for somebody starting out, like that's going, you know what, it's 2019, gosh darn it, I'm going to make my own company. What advice do you have for that person? What advice do you have for that person?
Well, actually, this is like the best time in history to, make your own games and start your own game company, because there's zero friction for getting your games out. Even as recent as like 10 years ago, there really wasn't digital publishing. So if you wanted to make a game that anyone would buy, you kind of had to work with a publisher who would do manufacturing and get into stores. But now anyone can publish a game on the App Store or Congregate, or like even Steam, and all the platforms, Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, they all have their indie programs. So basically, if you want to make a game, there's no barriers to entry right now. So my advice is to just do it. Get something out there.
Yeah. That's what I tell these guys all the time. Just do it.
Yeah.
It's like Nike. Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it. So one of the early games that you guys made as Way Forward was, I don't know how early, so you're already proving that my research is sketchy, so bear with me. But it's called Muppet Kids Reading Reading and Thinking series.
Yeah.
What was Muppet Kids Reading and Thinking series?
Okay, so that was the distributor I was talking about. Also they were a rack jobber, so they distributed stuff through grocery stores, and like including magazines and stuff. And so one time, their rep came by and like dropped off a bunch of products that they had, pens and like magazines and workbooks, and they were selling these children's workbooks that taught reading and phonics and math and stuff. And at the time, I was learning Visual Basic because it was recently out, and I thought, oh, I'll give this a try. What should I make? And I saw they were sitting there, on my desk. And I'm like, oh, maybe I can turn some of these math workbook activities into, games.
Games, yeah.
And so I did it, and it came out pretty good. And so I sent it to the distributor and said, hey, check this out. I didn't actually have any intention of selling it. I thought, I'd like to say I had some master plan, but no, it was kind of like, hey, check out this cool thing I made. And they loved it. So they started packaging them as floppy disks initially with the books. And they sold a bunch of them, and then later it became CDs, and they put the Muppet brand on, and we did a whole line of those.
Oh, wow. So first of all, that won an American Education Publishing Award at CES? That product?
Yeah, because educational software, I think, was getting popular because, as always, people like pick on the video games business as being bad for kids. And so it's like, well, hey, someone's doing educational video games.
Right.
So that's why we won awards.
Right.
It wasn't any revolutionary product or anything.
Right, because you weren't killing people. You were just
right.
You were educating them.
Teaching math.
Right.
Yeah.
So what did working on educational games teach you about making games? Like what lessons from making those helped you further on in your career? Other than reading and math.
Well, actually, it had nothing to do with games per se, but a lot to do with business because back then they were doing well enough that the publisher said, "Hey, let's start a new company, and you can be an owner of that." And I said, and so I traded 100% of Way Forward for 20% of their new company called Brighter Child Interactive.
Okay.
But since I didn't know what I was doing and I didn't have any lawyers or anything, I just there was no cash. It was just like,
stock.
Yeah. And turns out they were much better at selling books than software, And in their defense, it was a rough time. It was the mid-'90s. It was kind of like a bubble in the CD-ROM industry and stuff. So anyway, after like a year and a half, they filed for bankruptcy, and they liquidated everything. So all the IP that I had contributed to it, I lost. And even the equipment I had to buy back, I mean, it was like pennies on the dollar, but still I had to put on a credit card, so I had no income and racked up a lot of credit card debt.
Right.
But I got the equipment back and then went back to making games from there.
Well, then how did you get Way Forward back if you had...
Oh, they never took the name. Since they called it Brighter Child, the 20% ownership was actually my company. My Way Forward stayed around as a corporation and just owned 20% of the publishing company. Right. So when they went away, my corp was still in business.
Right. So it's not like you had to buy back the company that has your name in it.
No.
All right. That's good. All right. That's good to hear. So your Way Forwards, you guys are starting to make games again, right? You're kind of divorced from this educational structure, and the first breakthrough title, at least the one that I found, was Mickey's Ultimate Challenge, which it says here you did in 1994.
That was actually before splitting off from Brighter Child.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, that was, so after I ran out of money, did a couple things. Selling stuff at swap meets, which didn't work out very well, and I started taking on like freelance programming work. So I was a freelance programmer on this project called Mickey's Ultimate Challenge for Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Game Boy, and Game Gear. It was a black and white Game Boy at the time. And but for whatever reason, the the rest of the team kind of fell apart. I wasn't involved in that. I was just a programmer, but their artists left, and they never had found a musician or anything. So my girlfriend at the time, her brother was going to Cal Arts, so he hooked me up with an animator there, and then so that's how we got the animation. And then that's Rob Buchanan, and then his roommate Matt Bozon did the backgrounds, and I'm still working with both of them today. Actually, now like what 25 years later.
Yeah, that's great.
So and Matt Bozon's our creative director, and Rob is one of our other directors. And so, and then, you know, that was the game I did one of the songs, and then a friend of mine did the other songs for it.
Right. But that was published as a WayForward game, ultimately?
No.
Oh, who was
It was actually, the publisher was actually High Tech Expressions, who licensed it from Disney.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So was that well, it wasn't your first experience. Was that your first experience with licensed product?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Well, actually, wait, no, the Muppet stuff was before that. So,
Okay.
so yeah, technically like the second.
So what was the first game that you actively sought out IP, or like, you know, actively like, oh, hey, this company, they have this IP and there's this game, you know, did they come to you? Did you go to them? Like, you already had some experience working with intellectual properties, and as you learned from your educational experience that, like you said, your initial thing sold well, but then when Muppets were on it, it sold even better. Like, what was your first experience with dealing with IP?
Well, so we back then, like, work for hire was, you know, people hired us to do games, and so back in the mid '90s, I think the first games we did after we split off from Brighter Child was a Speed Racer game, and then a Radical Rick game, and those were both licensed.
Licenses, yeah.
And then, you know, keep in mind I had no income, a lot of credit card debt. Fortunately, back then, if you reached your limit on a credit card, they would just increase it. I don't think they do that as much anymore.
Not so much.
But that's when we had teamed up with John Beck, who was our biz dev guy. And man, I learned so much from him, because he used to sell encyclopedias, and he said, oh, it's a numbers game. You go out and you just cold call and talk to people. So he just talked to everyone, and we started getting, you know, project after project. So.
Right. So, and then your team is forming now. You have Matt, and you have John, and you have how many employees by this point?
We probably had around 12.
Okay,
back then.
that's still pretty good size. Even to this day, that's not a bad size, right?
Yeah.
Just for perspective, how many employees do you have now?
152 as of last payroll.
All right. Yeah. So you've grown a little.
Yeah.
All right, so I have to take a quick divergence, and as I was looking over your stuff, once again, might not be accurate, but what was Pissed?
Oh, that was, okay, so Pissed, we didn't actually, well, we did one update for Pissed, but that wasn't really our project. There was a company called Parody Interactive, and they did parodies, you know, and it was a parody. There was a game called Myst that was really popular, so they did Pissed. But after that, we did 3 other games with them. We did Star Warped, parody of Star Wars. We did The X-Files, parody of The X-Files, and then Microshaft Wind Blows 98, which was, you know.
A parody of Microsoft Windows. But what's the game for Microsoft Windblows?
Oh, we had one where, like, you know, you start playing this little asteroids game, and then blue screen of death, and then you start shooting.
So
like,
it's no different than an Xbox right now, right?
Yeah, they were kind of silly, but I learned a lot on those because their development cycles were only 3 months, and it was a CD, so we had to pack a CD full of stuff.
Oh.
So they were probably some of the most efficient games we've ever done.
Just because you were like, we've got to fill up. How much content did like fit on a CD back then? Like in
650 megabytes. I
okay,
think.
and then what would that translate in terms of like how many games worth of, like, would you do? Were these all mini games? Were these?
Yeah, mostly mini games and jokes and stuff. I mean, they were kind of silly, but they sold a lot of units, and they were fun to make.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, so WayForward's first internally designed IP was Shantae in 2002. Is that correct?
Well, the first one we published was Lit.
Oh,
Shantae
okay.
we had been trying to get publish our Shantae game for 10 years by that point. Shantae, so our creative director, Matt Bozon, and his wife, Erin Bozon, had created the character Shantae when they were in college at Cal Arts. And so he'd been wanting to make a game forever. And we've been trying and pitching, going back to the Super Nintendo, and no one would publish it. No one had any interest.
Why do you think that was?
I don't know. It was...
Was it a female main character?
Maybe it was a female main character. There was no brand. It wasn't like Disney or...
You didn't have a cartoon or something like that? No theme park ride?
Yeah, I mean, we pitched it to everyone, but, we were kind of at the mercy of the publishers.
Right.
So our first one was Lit, and it was for WiiWare, and it was like a horror puzzle game.
Oh, yeah, that was a great game, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I played it. Yeah, it was good. That was with where you were like, you were lighting.
Yeah, it was basically a puzzle game where you had to clear away the darkness by turning on lights, but you had to, you might break a window with a slingshot or turn on a TV that would cast light. It was, which, in retrospect, doing a lighting-based game for the Wii was not a good idea.
No, I thought it was cool, though.
Yeah, and we took advantage of everything. Like, a lot of people don't know that there were speakers in the Wii remotes, and so when you answered the phone, it was like we did everything. It was like a tribute to the Wii.
You were like way ahead than Kojima, right? Because Kojima now is using all those tricks in Death Stranding.
Okay.
You guys were way ahead of your time.
Yeah.
No, you guys. One of the things that I always associated, and I remember when Lit came out. I think I was that was what, early 2000s. 2002?
Well, it was like 10 years ago, so 2009 maybe?
Okay, yeah. So like I was, 2009 I was at THQ at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like trying to play everything. And I remember, I like horror games, and so when I heard that, hey, there's this horror game and it's on the Wii and it had to do with lighting, and I'm like, oh, that sounds really cool. And I remember playing it. I thought it was really well done, and that's when I think I first like noticed you guys as a company. Was like, these guys are doing interesting things. Let me keep an eye on what they're doing. Because I always would like I love treasure games, and so I'd always keep my eye out for like, all right, what are these guys going to do next, right? So yeah, I remember Lit. It was a good job with that one.
Thanks. That was our director, Adam Tierney. So we had done 9 Barbie games by then, and he had directed 3 of them.
Yeah.
So he really wanted to cleanse his palate after the third Barbie game. He was like, I got to do something like totally different.
Right.
So that's when he came up with Lit.
Nice.
So,
Yeah, well, that's Barbie games and Bratz games and all those tweenie games are like great motivators. They get you the experience to work on all these games. You learn how to make games, and then you make the one you really want, right?
Yeah. So. Although, if you ever play those Barbie games, you'll notice that a lot of them were like one of them was very closely modeled after Zelda 2. Another one was Lost Vikings, and another one was like Super Metroid. So basically, we would take like classic gameplay and then put the Barbie wrapper on it.
Yep. Yeah.
And so again, maybe we were ripping off games, but really it's a tribute or an homage. And we were educating like 6 to 9-year-old girls in like the classic.
Right. So you probably
games.
created some Metrovania fans,
Maybe,
right? As young girls. Yeah, I admit you weren't the only one doing that. We were doing that with all the Nickelodeon stuff. I did a Danny Phantom game, which was my tribute to Ikaruga, that treasure game where you shoot black or white. And then we did a game based on the movie Monster House that was essentially our version of Resident Evil. So like we took all, so yes, this was a very common thing back in those days. You like, somebody made something good. Let's do it. We love it. Let's kind of show our love for it and do our own riff on it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that,
Well, it's funny because reviewers, like we would get surprisingly good reviews for like being a Barbie game. And a lot of times reviewers were like, hey, this is exactly like Zelda 2. Like they would actually call it out as a positive, like, this game is awesome, and they actually like were proud that they recognized the inspiration for it.
Right. Yeah, they were part of the tribe, right?
Yeah.
So all right, let's go back to Shantae, right? So you guys were like, this is a really cool idea. It's a cool character. we want to make it and make it come to life. So how did you eventually? You said it took you like 10 years to get it off the ground. What happened? Like, what was the circumstance that finally the stars lined up to get it made?
Well, we had used Shantae art for all our internal like tech demos and tests. So we had Shantae running on everything in some form or another. But the Game Boy Color version somehow caught the eye of Capcom, and I can't remember exactly how. I think we just showed it to them, and they're like, "Wow, this is really cool." So they ended up publishing it, or at least distributing it, But we maintained the rights. So that was the Game Boy Color version was published by Capcom, and they only made like 14,000 units, so they didn't sell a ton.
Super rare. So you guys are collectors. Rare. You should find a copy, right?
Yeah, and then after that, the second one, digital publishing, was a thing. So Risky's Revenge was 8 years later, but that was on DSi. I think was the first release.
We'll talk more about some of the other ones later. All right, so I heard a rumor that you guys, way forward, tricked THQ into buying you Nintendo DS dev kits. Is that true?
We didn't trick them. You were at THQ. No, actually, so, okay, so that was Ping Pals.
Right, yeah.
And Mike Mashade.
Yep, Mike Mashade,
I've known him for like 15 years. I still can't say his name.
Yeah, neither can I. I worked right next to him. I still can't pronounce his name.
So he called us up and said, "Hey, we have a project that needs to be done in 6 weeks. Can you do it?"
Oh, I remember that.
And we're like, "No." And he said, "Well, we'll give you some DS dev kits." And we're like, "Okay."
All right.
So, so actually, well, first of all, I should start by saying that Ping Pals, not only was it our lowest scoring game ever, it got zeros. And by multiple reviewers, it got zero. I mean, you can look it up. It has zeros, and the internet never forgets. So, but it was still one of our, or like my proudest moments, because because in 6 weeks, so we had new hardware. It was a DS. It was a multiplayer game, which no one else was doing. We were the only multiplayer game at launch.
2004.
Yeah.
So really early on in the, first run on the life cycle of the system.
Yeah, first one. It was a launch title for it, and we had 6 weeks. And the Japanese, or the documentation was half in Japanese at that point. It was, but we did find a bug in there. So we were the only multiplayer game. If we hadn't worked on that, we wouldn't have found that bug that Nintendo did a last-minute patch to their firmware before they shipped the DS. So we helped Nintendo there. So even though it got zeros, THQ actually, one, it was their highest return on investment ever, partly because they spent so little money on it. but two, it was I think it was the highest number of units sold.
Okay.
I don't know. You might.
Yeah, it was. I remember
THQ. It was pretty.
I remember everybody talking about like Mike would always go around and talk about how great it sold and all that.
Yeah, it sold
and
really well.
I'm like, this is what sold so well,
Well, okay, so in their defense and our defense, it was very similar to PictoChat, but we had no idea PictoChat was coming out at all, much less going to be bundled with a DS.
Right.
So what happened was, as soon as we found out that PictoChat was going to be bundled, they gave us 2 extra weeks. So we ended up having 8 weeks. And to add a couple more mini games to it. But yeah, so we ended up spending a total of 8 weeks, added a bunch of mini games.
If it makes you feel any better, it was not the last time THQ misjudged what things were going to be on Nintendo hardware, right?
That's true. And now they're out of business.
And now they're out of business, partially because of that. Yeah, I worked on the iDraw. Which is
we did too. We did the Spongebob Squarepants.
I know you did the Squarepants. Yes. Yeah. Matter of fact, who came up with that idea? Actually, I was the one who pitched it to Nickelodeon.
Really?
Yeah.
How did I not know that?
I don't know. I was in charge of all the SpongeBob games at that point. So I was like, and I probably even
that was a pretty fun one.
It was a great one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know THQ went out of business after it shipped. So.
Yeah.
But I'd like to think that it wasn't because of SpongeBob Squarepants.
No, I thought SpongeBob Squarepants was a great game. I thought you guys did a great job. Matter of fact, I remember. So, all right. So this is where we first met. Speaking of SpongeBob, in the mid 2000s, WayForward developed several SpongeBob games, including Lights, Camera, Pants, SpongeBob the Movie, my favorite Creature from the Krusty Krab, and Spongebob Squarepants. So this is how we first met, right? So my question is, what was it like working with me? Say only nice things. No, what do you remember from that time period?
Well, Scott's a legend. He's like, okay, he can probably talk for 2 hours about toenail grabs, or something like, or ledge mechanics or something. He's like, so have you guys read his book? Or actually, you have 2 books.
I do have a couple of books, yeah.
So, but Level Up, was kind of like the Bible for game design. So you'd be hard pressed to meet someone who knows more about game design than him. So, if you haven't read the book, you should.
Yes, you should, and you should buy it on Amazon, or you can go to Barnes & Noble down the street. They have copies, or wherever fine books are sold.
Plus, you know where he works, so you can also just hit him up and ask him questions directly.
Right, yeah, I'm happy to answer questions. But yeah, I remember meeting you and John and Matt. I think we went to like a little coffee house that was like on the first floor under your bank. I was very charmed by your bank office. Like, did it have a vault or something? Or like the door was removed though, or?
There was, I think there was probably a space where the vault was, but it was Morgan Stanley and the coffee house below, Java and Jazz. This was like early enough that they didn't have now all coffee houses have Wi-Fi. Not that they need it anymore because people have cell phones, but back then they didn't. But at any given time, like probably half a dozen of our employees were down there, so we installed Wi-Fi down there for us. But we let them use it, for their customers too. So
that was very nice of you. Yeah, it was a good location. It was kind of a cute.
It was great. It was in the mall. It was right next to the movie theater. We never had to leave.
Never had to leave home, right? All right. So speaking of making your employees never leave for home, your official title at WayForward is Tyrannical Overlord. Who is your favorite Tyrannical Overlord role model?
Wow, that's a good question. but first, I want to give a background on the Tyrannical Overlord title.
Yes, yeah. Okay, where did that come from?
There was the comic book called The Tick, which now there's a series on Amazon, and there were animated series and stuff. But anyway, the comics had been out for not that long, and issue 2, I think it was. I don't know. One of the early ones was Clark Oppenheimer, and it was a parody of Superman. And the Jimmy Olsen character would always call the Mr. White character Tyrannical Overlord.
Right. Yeah.
And he's like, stop calling me that. And he's like, yes, Tyrannical Overlord. Like, there you go again. And he's like, whatever you say, Tyrannical Overlord. And so Matt Bozon, our creative director, started calling me that. And then I think it wasn't the first year at GDC. It was the first year at some conference, maybe E3. I don't know. I'd have to look back at the time. But I had to enter a title, and we didn't really have titles. But he had been calling me Tyrannical Overlord, so I thought, you know what, I'll put it in. I think it was E3, like one of the first E3s, and so I've been using that title ever since.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's awesome. I've always liked that. So, all right, who is your favorite Tyrannical Overlord other than you?
From other game developers?
No, just like in general. Be Dr. Doom.
Gosh.
Or,
it's like, it changes.
Sidious, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, he's pretty tyrannical. And apparently coming back? What's up with that?
Oh, no spoilers.
Well, I don't know. I don't know anything more than you guys do.
Just what I see in the trailers.
Yeah, exactly. So,
let's not go down the Star Wars path. We'll be here all night talking about Star Wars.
I don't know, Tyrannical. I do happen to think Elon Musk is pretty cool.
Yeah, okay. As far as Tyrannical Overlords go.
He's,
All right, okay.
Good.
So what are some of the tyrannical things you've done to your employees?
Wow. Okay. Next time I'm going to ask you to send the questions in advance so I can cross them. I don't know. We've kind of found our spot as an employer. It's tough for us to compete with like Blizzard or Insomniac or Respawn. Yeah. So we're actually kind of the opposite. Like we don't have a ton of crunch time. We try to avoid it. I won't say we always succeed, but for the most part, we try not to do overtime. The way we can compete with the Blizzards of the world is on like quality of life. So we've gotten a lot of employees who had kind of gotten beaten up in the game industry, and they were seasoned, but they wanted to settle down, raise a family, not work crazy crunch time all the time. So that's how we've gotten some of our more senior developers. And then we also hire a lot of juniors too, straight out of school. So if you guys are programmers especially, we're always looking for programmers. Any programmers? Anyone?
I'm sure there's some out there. Yeah.
Yay.
So
hit us up.
So what you're saying is you're the best kind of tyrannical overlord.
Well, yeah, it's funny because I've seen people. Matt's told me that people have come to him and he's like, he doesn't seem very tyrannical. And then Matt says like, he seems like that, but he can snap like at any second, just turn on you. So I think people still kind of cower when I walk by.
Well, maybe it's the cape.
Yeah.
All right. So let me go to the next page here. I'm so caught up in the tyrannical overlord conversation. All right. So this question is another one of my questions. Actually, Andy Ashcraft also. Do you know Andy? Have you met Andy? All right. He teaches here. He wanted me to ask this question, and he said, in 2007, WayForward created possibly the greatest DS game ever created, and that was Looney Tunes Duck Amuck.
Oh, yeah.
And I agree with him. I think it is possibly one of the greatest DS games ever made. Tell me everything about making it. Like how did the idea come up? How did you do it? Because for those of you that don't know, it's like a pretty early example of like if you guys know the cartoon, if you guys know animation, Duck Amuck is essentially a very absurd and Daffy Duck breaks the fourth wall in the cartoon a lot. And you guys like really captured the spirit of that cartoon. And that's like one of the greatest Warner Brothers cartoons ever made. And when like I remember getting that game and going, ugh, what's this? Another cash grab from Warner Brothers. And then I played it and I'm like, son of a gun, you guys really, really captured the heart of that cartoon. So how did you get that deal? Bring us through that process, because it is a fantastic game.
Well, I'd have to look back at the exact timing, but as I recall, this was when DS was recently out. I'd have to look at the exact year.
2007 is not, like 2004 was launch year, so.
Yeah, so it was getting really popular, and so we were getting a lot of requests, and Warner Brothers came to us and said, hey, which of our properties could you use to make a DS game? And I think Matt was the one who gets credit for this, but he remembered that Duck Amuck show, and he said, well, there's a pencil, and there was that show where Daffy Duck is fighting with the pen.
And that's the DS stylus.
It was a stylus, and he said, like, so that would be perfect, right? So that was the inspiration, was the fighting with the pen, because that was the only system at the time that had a pen, right? Yeah, right. So that was the whole inspiration. Matt gets credit for it, and then from there. We always like experimenting with like quirks of the hardware, and so one of the levels in there, you're trying to, you actually have to play. You have to close the DS. Yep.
And you could hear him like muttering through the speaker.
Yeah, he's talking to you and telling you like what buttons and stuff to press. Later on, Nintendo changed their policy because of that, because I guess it was causing too much stress on the
joint.
Yeah, on the joint. Yeah. So they stopped allowing stuff like that afterwards, but we snuck it in.
That's great. Well, yeah, that was a fantastic game. So definitely one of my favorites that you guys made. All right, so during this time, you're lots of companies are reaching out to you guys. They're like, hey, we want you to make stuff. You're doing a lot of things on the DS. You're also doing stuff for the Wii. And you really start to get a reputation, particularly for, at least at THQ, you got a reputation for making retro-style games, right? Like that was like your strong suit. And so you guys are making Contra 4, and you did the remake of A Boy and His Blob, and you did another one I really love, your Alien Infestation game, and Double Dragon 4. Was this move to kind of like, capture this retro vibe, was that a calculated move by the company or just kind of a happy accident?
It was probably because we were old, and we remembered when those games weren't retro, like they were actually fresh and new. Right. So they all had different stories. Like Contra, Matt was always Matt Bozon was a huge Contra fan, so he wanted to do that game for a long time. So we pitched it, and they said, okay, fine. But he didn't like, there already were Contra 5, 6, and 7, at least, maybe 8 or 9. There were other Contra games, but he didn't like any of them, and he said, so Matt asked them if we could, the publisher, if we could call it Contra 4 and just pretend the other ones never existed.
He pulled a James Cameron.
Oh, did he?
Because that's what they just did with the Terminator movies, right?
Oh,
They just said, oh, all those other ones after 2 don't exist.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, here's the new one, right?
Oh, okay. So
once again,
there's
ahead of your
precedent.
time, yeah.
Yeah, so they let us do that, and then that one, it got nominated for like Game of the Year. We lost to Zelda, so but
Typical.
Yeah,
Typical Nintendo biased.
Yeah, but they say it's an honor to be nominated.
It's not.
Well,
No, I'm kidding.
well, no, seriously, like losing to Miyamoto is an honor.
Okay.
So
Right.
so
that's fair.
yeah.
All right. So what about some of these other ones? Like Boy and His Blob, I remember was a big deal for you guys.
Yeah, so that was Sean Velasco. He was playing, like, I don't know what made him play the old Boy and His Blob game, but he said, this game is almost good. It's so close to being good that I really wish we could remake it. So we called around, tried to find out who had the license to it, found out it was Majesco, and said, hey, can we remake this game? And they said, sure. Huh. So that's how Boy and His Blob came about. And to this day, I'm pretty sure it's the only game that has a dedicated hug button in there. And there's no point to it. People always say, like, what was the gameplay mechanic for being able to hug your blob? And we're like, meh, it's just something fun to do.
Just love. Yeah, exactly. That's great. No,
you have a button dedicated to just hugging your blob.
Games need more hug buttons, I think.
Yes.
So was that a pretty common practice for you guys to go like, oh, here's this game that I played, it'd be cool to remake it, or here's this franchise I love. Was that the start of that kind of success for your company where you could just say, hey, we had this idea, let's reach out to the publisher and see if they want to do it?
I think that's what made, because publishers started coming to us after that.
Right, yeah.
So like Centipede, we did the 30th anniversary Centipede game, Double Dragon Neon. That was my phone.
That's your pants, okay.
Yeah. Well, DuckTales, ultimately. Right. What other remake? Yeah, it was just people started liking what we did and coming to us and asking us to. Blood Rain was another one like that.
So really the lesson is make good things and then people will find you.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. All right, that's good. Yeah. So, all right, let's talk about another one of my favorite Way Forward games, which is Batman: The Brave and the Bold.
Oh yeah.
One of my favorite. So for those of you that don't know this, now you did or did not develop the Wii version as well?
We did.
You did.
The
Okay.
Wii and the DS.
All right. So, who came up with possibly one of my favorite uses of the DS, which was to make Batmite the playable character through the DS? So for those of you that don't know, this is Brave and the Bold. This was based on the cartoon series from 10 years ago, I guess. 2010, so almost 10 years ago. And in it, you could play two-player in the Wii version. So you could have Big Brother playing Batman, and you could have Little Brother playing Robin, and then Baby Brother comes up and says, I want to play too. And you're like, ugh, I don't want to switch off. We're having too much fun. So what you guys came up with is you had it, all right, give them the DS, and they will play as Batmite, this third character, and without interrupting the flow of the Wii game, which I thought was brilliant.
Well, again, we love pushing the systems to the limits and exploring all those weird things that no one really thinks to do.
Right.
And I think a lot of people didn't realize that the DS had that capability. It was designed.
They could talk to each other.
Yeah, because I don't even know. Were there any other games at the time
I don't know of any others that did that.
Battle Revolution.
All right.
When did that come out? Before or after?
Before or after 2010, Perry?
I'm pretty sure that was a 2008, 2009 game. Like the main thing was you were importing your creatures from Diamond.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it might have been out before. But we had been wanting to use that feature. We'd been looking for an excuse for ages, and since the DS came out, and we finally, or the Wii, and we finally thought, well, hey, maybe we can put it in here. And we, asked Warner Brothers, and they said, well, sounds interesting. It seems kind of like a waste of time, but whatever. But actually, it ended up being great because the reviewers loved that.
Yeah.
It was like just some silly thing that really didn't have much point, because as Batmite, all you could do is mess with the other players, because he's kind of outside the Batman universe, and he knows that they're comic book characters. He knows, and actually that series, if you haven't watched it, you guys should find it. It's one of the best Batman series ever. You know,
that's my favorite one out of all of them.
yeah, mine too. Yeah. So, and then that was actually directed by, the Wii version was directed by Adam Tierney. The DS version was Sean Velasco. But the Wii version, he won an award for that script. He wrote like a 400-page script. And Adam, he was the guy who did the Barbie games and then Lit. But he's a great writer. He's actually written 2 episodes of Teen Titans Go. If you guys have ever seen that show.
That's great. So is he now a full-time screenwriter, or is he still working for you guys?
No, he still works for us.
Oh, okay.
He actually he's still directing. So, like, he actually directed River City Girls that we just released recently. Right. But he's primarily our biz dev guy. So after John left, he took over as our business development guy.
All right. Excellent. Okay, so at this point now, another big title for you guys was the Adventure Time games.
Yep.
The Hey Ice King, Why'd You Steal Our Garbage? Which is possibly one of the most unusual titles for a game. And Explore the Dungeon because I don't know.
Yeah.
So these both ended up being, I remember one of the things for me, other than Adventure Time and being very true to the license and all that, was that they were released as very high quality premium products. Like the presentation of them, I felt were very different than what most other, at least American publishers, were doing at the time. Like, where did that come from? Like,
well, Adventure Time Hey Ice King was Zelda 2.
Right.
Again.
Yeah.
And then Why'd You Steal Our Garbage, I think, was Zelda Link to the Past.
Okay.
But anyway, we actually, Pendleton Ward, the creator of that show, have you guys seen Adventure Time? He actually worked out of our office for a couple of months because he wanted to learn how to do pixel animation. I mean, he's a phenomenal animator, but he'd never done pixel animation. So he came and worked out of our office, and we kind of showed him the ropes on that, and it made approvals really quick and easy because he was right there. We could say, hey, how's this look? But
so did he, or like characters that he did in the game?
Yeah, he did some of the animation. I'd have to find out exactly which ones, but yeah, he worked on quite a bit of it.
That's cool. And then was that, I mean, he was, the mastermind of the whole thing, the cartoon and all that. Yeah. Was that idea of like tying in all that, really cool, like, we used to call them feelies, right? All the cool maps and things that came with it. Was that like designed as part of the game, or was that just like, well, it's going to be fun to kind of make this, let's just make this after the fact? Was the game designed with that in mind?
Most of it, the first one I remember, we didn't. They were kind of short time frames.
Okay.
I think they were like 5 or 6 months, which is pretty short.
Yeah.
And like most of our products, they didn't really go according to plan.
What didn't
which
go?
is something you get used to. If you ever feel frustrated that your project's not going according to plan, remember that that's like always the case. I think we had one project that actually went nearly according to plan, and that was our Lalaloopsy game.
Okay.
And I still remember it because it was like so close to the plan. But anyway, that one went in all different directions, and
was that because Pendleton was there, or was it?
No, he was. Actually, that was one of the first games that James Montagna, who's one of our directors now, who's super talented. But Matt Bozon was designing some of it. James Montagna was designing some of it. It kind of went in all these twists and turns. I think the final product ended up coming out good.
Yeah, it was good.
And if we had more time, it probably would have been a pretty, a more pleasant experience. But as it turned out, it was like we didn't get away from not doing overtime on that one.
Right. So you violated your core tenant. All right. Well, then it happens. All right. So possibly the most anticipated game that Way Forward has worked on is Ducktales Remastered.
Oh, yeah.
Because the original one had a huge following. And so how did you get involved in that project? And like, why were you guys chosen to develop it for Disney?
I think by then we had a reputation of revamping, classic arcade games. So DuckTales they came to us, and we had been working with Capcom like off and on since Shantae Game Boy Color.
Sure.
So and they actually gave us a lot of rope with that because they didn't. I mean, it was an old brand. They didn't really know the brand so much. Well, they knew the game, but not the brand. And Disney was a licensor, but Disney didn't have anyone there who still knew DuckTales.
What?
What?
What? They didn't have anyone who didn't know DuckTales?
No, so they, well, I mean, they knew what DuckTales was, but there was no expert. You know how Disney mostly, they have experts who will tell you exactly, oh no, it should look more like this or this. But in this case, they're like, hey, just do whatever you want, and you know.
There wasn't like make it like the old game, or
well, it couldn't be exactly like that. Okay. And we did a nice study of like, here's the old game and why it had to be that way. Here's what the actual characters look like, but they weren't the right proportions and stuff. So we came up with this hybrid. And they were very, you know, both Disney and Capcom were super agreeable with, you know, letting us do stuff. And so that's really how it came about. But yeah, it sold a lot better than I think any of us thought it would.
Yeah.
And the show, they relaunched the show afterwards. And, you know, we had heard unofficially, you know, that like that was largely because of our game, because they didn't realize it was still had any legs behind it.
Yeah.
But our game was so successful that it relaunched.
You
the TV
saved
show.
the brand. That's awesome. No, it was a great game, and I remember a lot of people being very, very excited for it, and also being very happy that it was simultaneously true to the original, but also innovative enough that it didn't feel like just a retread. So
yeah, we had a lot more content. We like to make our remastered games play the way you remember them and not the way they were. Because if you go back and play the original DuckTales, it had a lot of flaws. So we tried to fix all the flaws. We, you know, kept in all the good stuff. We added like 40% more content. And also Capcom deserves a lot of credit for how well they marketed it. They like that at E3 they did this karaoke booth where you could go in and sing the DuckTales song. And then when they launched it, they basically cut together that song with all the different people singing karaoke to it. It was, I mean, they were very clever with their marketing.
That's cool. So that approach of making the game the way you remember it, is that like the secret sauce for making those kind of games?
Yeah. You don't want to be so true to the original that it has all the flaws, and you know, you want to be like all the good stuff that you remember fondly, and but you know, also include modern sensibilities, because there are a lot of things about those old games that were just brutal, you know, that we've since learned are just bad design ideas.
Right.
So we try to fix all those.
So maybe you guys should like remaster Battletoads. Because there's a lot of bad stuff in that game. All right, so in 2018, you guys did a Kickstarter for Shantae, the Half-Genie hero. I backed that, by the way.
Oh,
but what was that experience like, and why did you guys make the decision to do it on Kickstarter?
Well, that was our fourth Shantae game, and the other ones we had self-funded, but we wanted to do, you know, an HD console version for all the consoles, and we just couldn't afford to self-fund that. We were still doing primarily work for hire, and so we kind of had to use whatever extra cash we could get from those to invest in our own games, and we just didn't have the money. So so we did a Kickstarter. We asked for $400,000. We ended up altogether raising about $985,000 if you count the Kickstarter plus PayPal plus backer kit, and you know, it's close to $1 million altogether.
Wow, that's great.
So
what'd you do with the extra $500,000?
Well, we spent that plus another $1 million on top of that. We way overspent, but we did sell off physical rights to Exceed. You know, that raised like another few $100,000, and then this place in China, we raised. This is kind of my, I guess, not rant, but the game industry has changed quite a bit. It used to be like there were just a few publishers that were the gatekeepers to all the stores, Walmart, Target, whatever, and so really you had to go through them to make any game. Now, because of digital publishing, the retail market is kind of struggling, but anyone can publish digitally. But raising money has become more challenging. So I think it's more like independent films, which I'm not a filmmaker, so I don't know. But you guys are, right? Or filmmaker? Are you guys all just games, or do you do films too? Since we're at the New York Film,
Mostly games, right? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I think the game industry seems to parallel the film industry, but 5 or 10 years later. So
we're like the Australia of the film industry.
So now for all our games, it's like going out trying to wrangle money from wherever we can find it. So Kickstarter was one, selling off physical rights since we don't publish physically, just digitally ourselves, and then kicking in some of our own money.
Right. How much did you make Boson, since it was his idea? Kick it a little bit more.
He should have. But it did well. Like we were very pleased.
And it turned out great. It was beautiful, and so one of the really nice things about the whole series is that it's not only is it very playful, but it's like colorful. That's what I love about it, is that it's just kind of refreshing, right? Like it's very pretty and fun to play, and it's like all your guys' stuff. It's very old school, but it also doesn't feel like it's old,
Well, thanks.
So tell Matt, good job.
Yeah. And the Kickstarter process itself, have any of you guys done Kickstarters or?
I did one. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Leo did
Cool.
one. Yeah.
Cool. How did you like it?
Yeah, I'm here now.
Okay. Well, that's the thing. Like I've known a lot of people who have had a tough time. For us, it was actually overall a really pleasant experience. Mm-hmm. But man, was it tiring! It was like a 30-day telethon, and
it's a
felt
full-time
like
job.
We didn't sleep for a month. Yeah. Forget overtime goes out the window there. It was just like no sleep, cross promotions, like constant messages. We had like 60-some thousand messages on Kickstarter, plus Twitter, plus Facebook, plus email.
Right.
So much work, but it was worth it. We had like 22,000 backers, and for the most part, they were all very supportive, and so it was a good experience, but really tiring, because people ask us, well, why don't you do another Kickstarter since it was so successful? I'm like, I'm getting tired just thinking about it.
You're like, now I know that what it's involved, right?
Yeah.
So you need to trick somebody else to do it, and then you just sit back and reap the profits.
We're actually talking with some people, because, talking about wrangling cash, there are places that will just run a Kickstarter. So
right.
we might do something in the future. We don't have anything specific yet, but we've talked to several places about maybe just running the campaign.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great. Well, we look forward to seeing whatever game that is. All right. So another very interesting game that you guys made started out as an April Fool's joke. And that is Cat Girl Without Salad, which when you guys first announced it on April Fool's, you said it was a game that was a puzzler, a platformer, a shoot 'em up, an action game, a shooter, an adventure game, a strategy game, a fighting game, a rhythm game, an arcade game, a horror game, a tactical game, an RPG, a TPS, an RTS, and a visual novel all in one, which is pretty funny. But here's where it's, how the hell did it become a real game? Like why? Why did you set yourself up for this huge challenge, and then you went, oh, it would be a good idea to make this?
Yeah, well, we thought it was a funny joke and an obvious joke, but then, several news people like Jonathan Holmes of Destructoid and some people ran with it and thought it was real. And then even after they found out it wasn't, Jonathan Holmes continued to say, you know what? I refuse to admit this isn't real, and so he just kept promoting it as being real. And so so we decided, well, okay, if we were to make a game that was a mashup of almost every genre, all the genres, how would we do it? And so we ended up doing, and it was really short. It was 3 months or something.
Wow. For that much stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you play it, I don't even know if it's available now.
It was part of a humble bundle.
Yeah, it was a humble monthly, so it was only out for 1 month, and it was super low budget, tiny team, for a few months. Again, the script, Adam wrote the script for that, and it was awesome. In fact, if you YouTube it, you can just listen to his
commentary.
Yeah, well, just the banter. So Adam's thing, which we've been trying to incorporate in all of our games now, is no one likes to interrupt gameplay with story, right? Because they want to play, right? And they're constantly skipping past the cinematics and stuff like that. So what he pioneered, for us at least, with Batman, and now we've been doing it in most of our games, are if you have multiple characters, you can have them bantering with each other and expose the story that way. So that's why the Batman game had like a 400-page script. And Cat Girl Without Salad, if you ever YouTube it, you can play through the whole game in like 40 minutes. But it's just nonstop talking, you know. The character's talking the whole time. I mean, it's a shooter for the most part, but it's got like golf and, you know, Tetris and Dance Dance Revolution and all kinds of...
All types of games. That's awesome.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll get it... We keep talking about having it come out again, so maybe one of these days.
Remaster it.
Well, just actually releasing it somewhat, because you can't really get it at this point.
Right. Yeah, you should release it, right? It's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. You guys are crazy for doing it, though. You realize that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. At least you
I take no part in that. I tried to talk them out of it, and they went and did it.
But they talked you into it.
They just went and did it.
They just went and did it.
That's the problem with being a tyrannical overlord, is they don't listen. You know, most of the time they just kind of do their own thing.
You need like robot guards or something to enforce your will.
Yeah.
Right? Get on that.
Not a bad idea.
Make some robots. I mean, you guys have made so many games. You like over 60 games by my count.
Technically 200
What?
physical release. We lost track after 200. I'm pretty sure it's closer to 300 now.
Okay.
But we lost count after like 200.
How did is this just because the like the Wii version and the DS version and that, or it's
No,
not
it
like
was-
200 unique titles, right?
Well, keep in mind, like the Muppet ones, there were like 8 of those.
Okay,
You know,
all right.
and 9 Barbies and all of the Adventure Times, and then, well, we might have included the .com. Like during the .com bubble, we did like 18 games in one year, and they were all like, you know, like Austin Powers, Movie or Mojo, like Wheel of Fortune, like stuff that was tie-ins to movies and stuff.
Okay.
So
Like advert
they
games.
add up. Advert games.
Yeah,
Yeah, we did a ton of those.
Okay. All right. So 300.
Yeah, at least 200, probably closer to 300.
All right. So out of all those almost 300 games, which one is your favorite?
I should have known you were going to ask that.
I trapped you.
See, you gotta love your games for what they are, right? So I love all of them for different reasons. I think it's like, you know, having children, right?
But
love
most
them
people
all.
don't have 300 children.
Well, that's true. Actually, you know, I love Ping Pals. I know it got zeros, but I still look back on that as like, wow, I still am in awe that we actually accomplished that.
Right.
And it put us squarely on the map, because after we shipped that, since it was one of the launch titles, we were turning down work for DS. Like, all the publishers were coming to us. We were kind of unstoppable on the DS just because of that, you know, crappy game that got zeros.
Well, it got you more work from THQ, right?
Oh, yeah, tons.
So-
and Mike even after that.
Oh,
like
yeah.
505 and stuff.
Yeah. Well, he loved that game. Like I said, he talked about it all the time. So your ugliest child is your favorite child, is what you're saying.
Wow. Well, see, there, you know, Lalaloopsy was pretty good.
Okay, all right.
Because that was like really close to plan. That was another one where we turned it down twice. We said, we can't do this. 6 weeks isn't enough time to make a game. Forget it. But they're like, come on, please, we need someone to do this. We're committed. And so we kind of did it as a favor to them. But we said, okay, you have to just let us do our thing. You know, here's what we're gonna do, and just don't make any changes. And somehow, like, we did exactly that, and it came out in 6 weeks, and our profit margins were like 70% because we spent very little money on it, and people loved it. Like, I mean, granted, it was targeting like 4 to 5 year old girls, so it's like they're we're easier to please, but you know, it's pretty popular in that demographic.
Nice. All right. So you have more than one favorite child.
Yeah, I know. I should probably pick the big ones like Shantae and stuff.
No. The little ones need love too. So, all right. Which one was the one you were most excited about making? Like when you got the deal, you know, when the ink dried on the contract, you were like, all right, I can't wait to make this.
Oh, that's a good one. And I did not see that one coming. Gosh, there were a lot of really exciting ones. I can tell you one that was exciting but didn't turn out as well, like Silent Hill. So again, Adam Tierney. We used to publish a list of our top 10 favorite games. Like everyone, that was kind of the rule. You had to publish a list of your top 10 favorite games. So his number one was Silent Hill. And and so when that project came in, we're like, well, clearly Adam's got to direct this. This is like his thing.
baby, yeah.
Yeah. But what we didn't realize is it was a weird spin-off version of Silent Hill for the Vita, and the kind of the director at Konami on it was had this. He wanted it more like Diablo. It was the first multiplayer Silent Hill. It was very not Silent Hillish. Now I do think the game came out pretty good. If you play the game or see it, it's like everyone who like a lot of the reviews said, hey, the game is definitely not Silent Hill, but it's more like Diablo, but it's really good. So, but a lot of the fans, like Silent Hill, has some really rabid fans, and they were like, this isn't a Silent Hill game.
Most
what are you guys
of them
doing?
pretend everything after 2 doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea. Yep.
So you were excited about doing that partially for Adam's sake, and
Partially for Adam's sake, and of course, Silent Hill is an awesome series.
Yeah,
so.
it's an awesome series. So is there a series or an IP that you would love to make a game for that you haven't done so?
Me personally,
Yeah.
because like I'm thinking of all the ones that I like know, like, well, Mega Man would probably be a really good one, and believe me, we have pitched that so many times.
Yeah.
One of these days. I mean, we've been pitching it for years, but so Mega Man would be awesome. What's another one? I don't know. Something. See, I think if and it has to be based on like a brand that actually is out there in the world.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, recently, and again, I'm like, it's hard to not cloud my judgment by like people around me, but my daughter watched Umbrella Academy 3 times, and I loved it too.
Yeah,
So
the comic's great.
Yeah, the comic's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, this would be the art style is awesome.
Yeah. Gabriel
Everything
Ba
about it.
in a video game form would be amazing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So would love to do that one.
Okay.
That would be a
They're
good
just Warner Brothers just next door, right? Don't they have the rights to it?
one. Well, I don't know. See, that's the thing. Netflix has been like a black hole. We can pretty much talk to most licensors, but Netflix has been really hard to like pin down.
What about Dark Horse? Right?
Well, Dark Horse Comics we did talk to, and they did say it was available.
Oh, well, there you go. Well,
So,
maybe.
and that's Gerard Way,
Yeah.
his baby.
Yeah.
Who, I'm convinced, and I have nothing to back this up, that he's like a distant cousin of mine.
Because of the last name.
Last name Way.
Yeah. Okay.
And like the time, like I think he's probably a cousin, maybe a third or fourth.
It sounds like a
fifth
good
cousin.
opportunity to call him up. And
Yeah,
go,
I'll
hey
just say, like,
cousin,
"Hey, cousin."
what's up? Come over,
do
play
it?"
some video games, and then he'll be like, "This is awesome," and you're like, it'd be awesome, an Umbrella Academy game, and he'd be like, "You're absolutely right," and then you make it, and then after that, for an encore, you make the My Chemical Romance game, and that will
Ooh.
sell
Oh, yeah.
to all the depressed teenies.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. My daughter's 13 now, so
She's into
going
that.
through that emo phase.
Nice, nice. Which game didn't turn out the way you thought it would?
Oh, wow. Well, that list is huge. And I'd probably get lynched for like talking about any of them. I'm trying to think of which of them I can talk about without like,
Pissing off somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I mull that over in the back of my mind while we go
All right,
to
all
another
right,
question?
all right. We're going to. Do you have any funny stories about making the games? Like something really weird or unusual happening either during the production or when you're playtesting it or pitching it or.
Probably have lots of stories, but let's see. Trying to think. Well, there was this homeless guy that kept coming into our office.
Mm-hmm.
We probably should have kept it locked, but we'd chase him out. We'd find him like sleeping under a desk, and we'd go chase him out.
Did you know how to code?
What? He didn't. No, but we did get some. We called them thugs just because they had been in jail, but they weren't really thugs. They were super nice, but they helped with audio when we were desperate. We were doing a game that had like, I don't know, tens of thousands of lines of VO, and we needed some people. So
So you just brought people off the street to
yeah,
act?
basically,
Yeah.
it was from the coffee house.
Oh, okay.
Went down and said, "Hey, anyone want to chop up audio? So we brought them up.
Oh, actually, like doing the production work on the audio.
Oh,
not,
yeah.
Not like
Oh, yeah,
recording
no.
voices or anything.
No.
Oh, I thought you were just going to the coffee house and saying, "Hey, you want to be in a video game?"
Well, no, we've done that too. Like we've done open casting calls for, you know.
Really? Where do you guys advertise these?
Sometimes we'll put them in flyers at like Java and Jazz. Other times we'll just email around. Although lately,
I got to get on that mailing list.
well, lately Christina V, who does a lot of anime dub voiceover, she's been our casting director. So now we just go to her.
All right.
Yeah.
No,
so
no
like
more.
River City Girls, like, and she sings. She's the voice of Shantae. Well, she does acting in most of her games and directing for them.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to do VO, including you, I'll introduce you to Christina. So
All right.
just send her a demo reel.
I do have a demo reel.
Okay, perfect.
I did all the stuff in Maximo,
Oh, nice.
or a few of the characters, uncredited, of course. Anyway, all right, back to the question you've been avoiding, which is which one did turn out the way that you thought it would turn out?
Wow. It was mostly brand. I'm trying to think of like an original one. I mean, we've had a lot of games go really late and like nearly put us out of business. I can probably safely say Disney Descendants because that whole group has been laid off. And Disney's pretty famous for that. I think like
Yeah.
every 5 or 6 years they like cycle in. So I'm still probably going to get lynched somehow, somewhere for saying this. Wait, you are posting this on YouTube, right?
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
But anyway, that game, that it was kind of, you know how most of our games are inspired by other games, popular games. Well, this one was inspired by Kim Kardashian Hollywood, and actually that's how we pitched it to Disney. And so they said, hey, well that game's made $160 million.
We can do
try
that
it.
too.
Yeah. But unfortunately, they didn't realize that what made the Kim Kardashian game so fun was all the snarky, like just the snarky humor and dialogue and stuff. So we had that again. Adam wrote the script for it. He pretty much writes all our scripts now because he's really good with that. And he had all this really awesome snarky dialogue, but they said, well, they're Disney characters. They can't be snarky, But that kind of defeated the whole purpose of the game. We ended up having to redo the art a whole bunch of times. Yeah. So that kind of pushed the schedule back, which was supposed to coincide with the movie. And then it was just, and that was actually the first free-to-play mobile game. Well, it was kind of in parallel with Adventure Time Puzzle Quest, which was a great experience. But Disney Descendants, it was a free-to-play mobile game. We had zero experience in it. We had to do all the server code ourselves, and we had no experience with that. We didn't know how to do live ops, so a lot of the blame was probably on us. But it wasn't made any easier by all the there are a lot of people at Disney who have to approve everything.
Sure. Yeah.
So even though the direct producers were great to work with, they had to get approvals from everyone. So I can't blame them,
Right.
But
it's just the process.
It's just a process, and then there's so much red tape, and then after, so the project ended up costing us, and this was all on our dime, like triple what it should have cost and what we had budgeted. So yeah, that was kind of a bummer of an
these
experience.
Things happen, though.
And we didn't do any more free-to-play games for a while after that. Although we just released another one. Our third one came out last week. There's a Netflix show called Miraculous: The Adventures of Ladybug and Cat Noir, and you guys probably have never heard of it because it's like a kid thing.
I know of it.
Okay.
It's a massive meme.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. So then you have heard of it
I wish
as a
I
meme.
didn't.
Okay. Well,
Well-
anyway, it's popular again with 6 to 12-year-old girls. And so we made a match 3 game for it, which, and it was super fast time frame, but we had already done Adventure Time Puzzle Quest, so it was,
Right, same mold.
Yeah, it was same mold. And it's got like either a 4.9 or 5, it's hard to tell in iTunes,
Right.
but it's really highly rated, and
Wow.
it's getting a ton of downloads. So
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Good for you.
That was a good one.
Yeah. All right. So you guys have made many, many, many games. Did I miss any? I mean, I probably missed some, right? What's one that you want to talk about that we didn't talk about? Is there anything that
gosh.
like you're like, oh man, how could we not have talked about blank?
Well, during the .com bubble, we did all these things like the Austin Powers movie or Mojo, which was like a DDR type dancing game. But we did some advert games, like you mentioned, that had, we did a Nissan Xterra snowboarding game. And what was funny is you would think that, oh, well, putting a Nissan Xterra brand on a snowboarding game, first of all, is a bad idea. But secondly, it was only locked in for 45 days because they paid for development, and then after that, we took out the branding. But as soon as we took out the Nissan Xterra branding, we got tons of hate email because like they're such a rabid fan base. Those Nissan Xterra people, they go on like the enthusiasts, they go on these like caravans and stuff. They're hardcore. And so we never thought that taking out a license, like an like a sponsor, would cause so much backlash.
So are you going to make another Nissan game?
We should.
You should, right?
But
Obviously, there's a fan base that's very rabid that wants another Nissan game.
yeah.
That could be your next Kickstarter. All right. Remaining independent for so long is a huge accomplishment. So congratulations.
Oh,
What is the secret to Way Forward's longevity?
That's a good question. Okay. I would say one of the things we do is we try to have at least 5 or 6 projects going on at any given time because, if you have one project, a lot of studios just have one project. And there's a lot to be said for that because just focusing on one project is probably going to make it come out better, except if that project gets canceled or delayed or any number of things that can happen, which they do all the time, you're screwed and you're out of business. So having 5 or 6 is like the perfect match. And it was a guy from like Iron Helix a long time ago. He was interviewing us as a developer for one of their projects. And we were just at lunch and I said, out of curiosity, what do you look for in a developer? Because he's been doing the circuit. And he says, well, I look for developers who have multiple projects, preferably at least 5 or 6 going on, because that way I know that they can weather any storm that comes up. And so we kind of took that to heart and have been doing that. So I think that helped. Also, we're not, even though we kind of do sometimes get typecast as doing like Metroidvania or actions, platformers, side scrollers, we do all kinds of stuff. We've done a whole bunch of stuff now for Princess Cruises. If any of you go on a cruise, their new Medallion class, we did some casino games. We did some games that you play on their big, football stadium size screen by the pool deck. We did a whole bunch of multiplayer games that passengers can play with each other.
Did you have to go on a cruise to test out all those games?
Yeah, although it's not as glamorous as you think. I mean, most of the time we had to come out at night, like when the passengers weren't doing stuff.
Like cockroaches.
Like cockroaches, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of good food.
Yeah.
Although I mostly lived off the dessert bar because,
Why not?
Why not? Yeah.
All right. Cool. That's awesome. Well, next time I'm on a cruise,
Yeah.
I will check it out.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know when I'll be on a cruise, though. I'm a teacher, remember?
Oh.
Yeah.
When you retire.
Yeah, well, when I retire, right.
Well, we also did like Eeg Neurofeedback Games. We were actually at one point NPR on KCRW. NPR did a kind of a story on us, and we were the world's foremost developer of Eeg Neurofeedback Games.
Those are the ones you control with your brain?
Yeah, it's your brain.
Is
Yeah, and it's to treat like epilepsy and ADHD and things like that.
Oh, cool.
And then we did some robotic stuff for Evolution Robotics. We did some other theme park stuff that I can't really talk about now. Oh, we did a couple things for, this was a long time ago. We did some for the World of Plastics in Epcot.
Yeah.
I never actually saw it, but we did one of the games there. It was where the park guests will come in and kind of design a robot on the screen and then put it through little stress tests.
Yeah.
I never saw it in action because I just never.
I only heard about it. I think, what year was that when you guys did that?
Oh, probably 10 or 15 years ago. It's been a while.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I remember hearing about it, and I was like, oh, you guys worked with Way Forward. Awesome. I love those guys. All right, so speaking of which, I'm sure you guys have some questions. So we have a microphone set up there in the back. If you have a question for Voldi, go right up there and ask away, please. And make sure the questions aren't, will you hire me or publish my game or something like that.
Well, those are okay questions.
Those are okay? All right, all right.
Got two right off the bat. First one, since I freaking love this game past summer. What was it like dealing with the other 4 studios and Eega himself when it came to working on Bloodstained?
Oh, I mean, it ended up being like phenomenal, but that was another project that we were really scared to touch. We turned it down twice because we were huge fans, and actually randomly we had like probably half the people in our company had backed the Kickstarter. I backed the Kickstarter. Like we all loved that and we're super excited about it, but we didn't want to be known as the developer who screwed up Bloodstained. And so we kept turning it down, and then 505 kept coming back like, hey, we need help. And so we jumped in, we did what we could, and I think it came out pretty good. I don't know, do you like it? Or like, yeah, I think it came out good.
It's the first actual Castlevania game in years, even though it's not Castlevania in name.
Yeah.
I
No,
freaking
we
love
were, so it was a great, to answer your question, it was an awesome experience working with them. We were super nervous and scared that we wouldn't be able to pull it off because there was a lot of work to be done, but you know, and I love the video that Eega did where he's like,
yeah,
not good enough, you know.
That was true.
So yeah, it was great.
Him saying not good enough.
Well, yeah, he actually, the fact that he would do a trailer where the first part of it is just posting horrible Twitter reviews.
Right.
yeah, of
It's like,
everybody
who does
complaining
that?
about the old graphics.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
remember that trailer before it launched.
Yeah. So yeah, it was fun.
And the second question is, how the heck did you guys get Studio Trigger to do your opening for the 5th Shantae game?
Man, you're like kind of really in the weeds with this stuff. Yeah, that was Matt Bozon. He loves Studio Trigger. I don't know. Do you guys know Studio Trigger? Because like in anime circles, they did Kill la Kill and you know some Gurren, I guess.
Gurren Lagann, one of the
Gurren
big
Lagann,
mech
yeah.
animes.
Yeah. So anyway, so Matt's loved them for forever, and he really wanted them. He's been bugging them for years, and finally they said, you know what? We've got this small window where like they were between shows, and they said, you know, if you can get us all the assets like by this date, you know, we'll try to squeeze it in. And the other reason we did it is normally we would do the cinematics ourselves, but for Shantae and the Seven Sirens, the time schedule was really, really compressed, especially for a Shantae game where we usually take like 4 or 5 years, and this one I think was like 9 months or something, 10 months. I don't know, it was really short. So we had to call in help wherever we could, so we called up Trigger. And I actually tried to talk them out of it, because when we paid for it and they gave us a bid, I'm like, what? You know, this is like ridiculously expensive. Or well, I shouldn't say that. It was a lot more than we would have spent with other studios. But Matt said, yeah, but it's Trigger, of course. It's going to be great. It's going to be totally worth it. And the thing is before that, if you look at any of our trailers, the most views we've gotten were like 350,000 views or something. That one came out and we got 3.5 million views. And I'm like, wow, well, Matt was certainly right. It was definitely worth the money, just if nothing else for promotion. Plus, it came out awesome. And actually, have you guys seen Promare, their movie?
I am going to see the rerun of it this December. I am so mad I missed it the first run.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, they're going to do it again, but they put our Shantae trailer in the beginning of the movie. So if you go see it in the theater, you'll see our trailer there. Mm-hmm. So they were clearly happy with how it came out, too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks. Yeah. Get them on.
Howdy. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Was wondering, this is kind of an expansion on Scott's question about longevity. I think he asked it more from a perspective of way forward, but I was wondering more about 2D action platformers, action adventures, their longevity. You know, you hear people talking about VR and where, like, you know, what's going to sell as products in the industry, in the industry in like a couple of years. Was wondering just the legs on 2D and what you thought about it.
That's an excellent question. I always thought, like, you know, I kept thinking that 2D would be dead, but you know, since that's what we were famous for, of course, we kept doing more of it. So it's hard to predict because I predicted the death of 2D like 15 years ago, and it clearly hasn't happened yet.
Thank goodness.
So I've given up trying to predict. Yeah, but one of the reasons we kept doing it is we can't really compete with, Respawn or, Insomniac or, those. We can't do like a Call of Duty game. We won't even attempt it.
You do a 2D one.
We could do a 2D one, yeah. Yeah. Maybe like a spin-off game or something.
Yeah. But they had a 2D game in their game, in Call of Duty, remember? Black Ops had a 2D game.
Did it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're ripping you off.
But anyway, yeah, so it's hard to say. Why, are you a 2D fan, or like do you...
I'd like to develop 4, or just before I get into it, ask the guy that heads way forward, so,
I mean, VR, we've done 3 VR games so far. Well, no, we helped Studio Rokovan on World War Toons. We helped Servios on Raw Data. We did Tank Up, which is a mobile game. We did Space Drifter, which was just a little tech demo that helped get us some other projects. So, personally, I'm a big fan of VR. I backed the original Oculus Kickstarter. I've had pretty much all the devices since then. Oculus Quest is amazing if you guys haven't tried it. Anyone? Oculus Quest?
Yeah.
You have the Rift? Oh, you have the Rift S. Rift S, wow, okay. Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, I think VR is great, although I think it's a little early. Like, there was a lot of hype, but it's just kind of a hard sell still, but, I haven't given up hope on it.
would you be like more worried about like VR versus like 2D? Given that?
You mean which one is more likely to be viable in the future?
I guess so, yeah.
Like for you, if you had to choose whether to focus on VR or focus on 2D?
Focus on 2D.
2D?
It's got more longevity.
Well, I was going to say focus on VR because it hasn't really been nailed yet. Because it's the thing. 2D is great, and but there are a lot of places that do 2D, right? So you'd have to come in, and you're competing with like a much bigger category. Now, granted, there are a lot of people doing VR.
Make a 2D VR game. That'd be amazing.
That'd be great.
That's true. Well, the Chrono Trigger game is kind of like that.
A little bit.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Like our philosophy is we just go with the flow, right? Whenever we like dogmatically say, you know what, the future is blah, it never turns out that way. So we just kind of roll with the punches. I think that, like, as far as longevity, I think it's because we're adaptable. We are like cockroaches, like you said. We're like the cockroaches. Or I'd like to say we're like redwoods.
There you go. Much better.
Yeah, because I don't know if you know, but redwoods, since their bark is thick enough to survive forest fires, whenever there's a forest fire, they always have a growth spurt afterwards because all their competition was burnt down. So we've actually survived. It seems like every 6 to 8 years there's some like major industry disruption or crash or something, and a lot of developers go out of business. And we have almost gone out of business like during those times, but somehow we survive. And then after that, we've usually had growth spurts just because there's fewer developers out there.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How you doing? Thank you so much for coming. This question is more tailored towards the entrepreneur inside of you, which is, how do you manage a growing firm in regards to a video game company, especially growing from 12 to where you guys are at currently? How did you manage that growth spurt over time?
We just, again, I wish there was like a master plan, but we just kind of winged it, One thing I will say is we tend to be slow to hire because like I've seen studios who somehow scale up overnight, and it's always tough because they're not all going to be winners, and it's super risky when you do that. So we tend to be, we tend to like grow more slowly, I think, than than some studios have. So, but yeah, as a business, well, one, always focus on the customer. I mean, like any business, I think you focus on the customer. Because I have seen other developers who were too dogmatic about it's our way or the highway. You came to us because we're geniuses, and so you should do it our way. But really, the customer well, I won't say they're always right, but they're always paying the bills. So,
So that makes them right.
that makes them right. Yeah, yeah. So focus on the customer. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I actually have two questions. I'll start with, I think, a simpler one. Recently, I've been seeing a lot of Apple Store releases, and I've been wondering, are those temporary exclusives? Like, I see, like, Spider Sores and the Shantae recently got released on there. Will those be released on other platforms?
Shantae, yeah, absolutely will be. We don't have a date yet, but it will be. So just like, you know, it's their limited time exclusive, and then Spider Swords is the same kind of scenario. That one will be longer, but eventually that will be out on other platforms too. But yeah, no, that's a good observation.
Yeah, I was confused because there was very little information about that, and I felt that there may have been confusion amongst fans.
Yeah, no, that's true, and you know, and Apple was great to work with, so we, you know, but yeah, but Shantae absolutely is coming out, you know, so just stay tuned for that. When we've nailed down a date, we'll announce it, and then eventually Spider Sores.
Cool. And I'm curious, how much of your workforce is outsourced, like developers and artists?
So we have 152 people on site, plus we have, you know, half a dozen or so kind of employees who are just in other states. But then there are a lot of freelance. We worked with a lot of freelancers just kind of all over the world. And we work with studios too. We work with Top Egg in not Singapore. Where are they? Well, we work with Top Egg. We work with Bit Egg in Thailand. We've worked with different studios in various places, mostly on the art side, animation. Programming is really tough to outsource, but we're trying that. Recently we've actually had more luck with it. We found a couple, you know, studios that had programmers that we just worked well together. So we're trying more of that, but the bulk of the programming is still done in-house. But art, we still have the core team and all the art directors, all the art leads, and a lot of the actual animation and, you know, 3D modeling and stuff is done in-house. But then a lot of the secondary animation, or, you know, when we're in the heat of production, we'll outsource art as well.
All right, thank you.
All right, any more questions? All right, as always, I like to get in the last word question-wise. So my question is, what is next for Voldi Way and Way Forward?
Well, actually, it's been a busy time for us, and I think it's because subscription gaming services have become a thing, or starting to become a thing, and everyone wants to be the Netflix of gaming. So, you know, so much in the way Netflix kind of disrupted television and movies too. You know, I think that everyone's trying to do that with games. So, you know, you've got Apple Arcade, you've got Stadia, you've got, you know, the Epic Game Store, and a bunch of other places trying to compete on that. So it'll be an interesting few years with all these subscription services.
So the demand for product is going to be very high.
Yeah, yeah. Microsoft Game Pass,
Yeah.
PlayStation Now.
So once again, a good time for new game companies to form and maybe try to help fill that void a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. I think now is an exciting time. You know, I think it probably will end up being a bloodbath for someone because, you know, they're not all, no one's going to subscribe to all the subscription services.
Right.
So, but, you know, now's a good time while they're still trying to, you know, figure it out.
Take advantage of the confusion.
Yeah. And it's an exciting time because also there are all the new platforms coming out, you know, PS5 and Project Scarlet, and, you know, plus like the new PC hardware, like the NVIDIA, the ray tracing stuff, RTX looks amazing.
So go out there and make games because somebody is out there buying them.
Yeah, and like I said at the beginning, this is seriously the best time in history to make games. And so if you're an artist, like team up with a programmer. If you're a programmer, find artists. And also just with social media, you can go to the game jams and social media. You can find other enthusiasts. So really, there's no excuse not to make a game at this point, if you're interested in that. If you're not, then
Why are you watching this?
no.
Well, thank you very much. Let's have a big hand for our Master of Game Design, Voldi Way.